Yes, I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Hart, who is the President and CEO of Virgin Orbit. Now, firstly, I understand that earlier this month you had the final testing of the development program for Launcher One, which I believe was a success. Is everything now on
That,
track? Is everything now on track for the first Virgin Orbit launch?
yes, we're heading forward. We had a wonderful, very successful full captive carry dress rehearsal where we loaded all the propellants into the vehicle per our launch countdown procedures. Flew out to our launch position and performed all of our maneuvers, all of our communications, all of our handoffs, and then came back and offloaded. So it was really a terrific day, very successful. The system performed very well, and probably at least as importantly, the team performed magnificently. So it
Yeah.
was a great day.
I mean, is it right that before that you were testing with water? So that's kind of the main difference. Is this was the first time you used repellents?
Yes, this is we have done quite a bit of loading and offloading with the rocket. We had also done a taxi test where we had done everything up to the point of takeoff, but this was the first time that we actually flew off with cryogenic propellant.
Ah, cool. Now turning to kind of more UK specific stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in Cornwall with Spaceport Cornwall, and I
Yep.
think that's been getting a lot of support from both the UK government, but also Cornwall County Council and the UK Space Agency. I mean, I know the original plan was to try and have horizontal launches there possibly by the end of 2021. I mean, is that still on track? I kind of wondered if maybe coronavirus would take that.
We're evaluating the effects of the corona virus and the impacts, and so there is some question there. We had planned to have a large supplier conference. Um, yeah, I think it was right when corona started to hit and close things down.
Yeah.
I want to say early March. It might have been late February. And so that's impacted our ability to fully engage on the next phase, which is building our equipment for Cornwall. And we plan to do that in the UK, and we were all ready to fly over and have a fairly large meeting with potential suppliers when all of a sudden there was no way to have a meeting. And yeah, so we're evaluating the impacts of that, and there's a good chance that that will push it from late 21 into early 22.
Yeah. I mean, I read that there are regulatory barriers both in the UK and the US before Spaceport Cornwall becomes operational. I mean, are they still being surmounted or are they becoming quite tricky?
I wouldn't say there are barriers. I would say there is definition that needs to take place. When you do space launch, there are regulatory considerations, and there's just work to do to put those in place, get them coordinated. And so, to my knowledge, that's happening. In the U.S., where there's obviously been a lot of space launch, the regulations are updated periodically. So even in here, there's a lot of work going on, and there's a lot of work to do, certainly in the UK, to to start up space launch there. The good thing is there's a lot of resources and information that's available, and so that's not an insurmountable task.
Yeah. I mean, so quite a lot of the funding, I think, is coming from the UK Space Agency and Cornwall County Council. And presumably that's integral to the project. I mean, you kind of need the government involvement and private-public
I'm
partnership.
sorry, can you repeat your question?
Sorry, I understand that quite a lot of the funding is coming from the UK Space Agency and also from Cornwall County Council. I'm presuming that's integral to the project. It's very much kind of a private-public partnership.
It has been, and there's funding coming to build the infrastructure to launch. There's also funding coming to make upgrades to the airport that have dual use capability, not only for us but but it will help the airport, overall. And I mean, we're delighted that we could take a system that there's been a very large amount of private investment in, and make it operate, over in Cornwall, and become part of the economic ecosystem of that area. And that's it's somewhat of a unique feature of ours in that, given that we're air launched, it makes us mobile and portable, which allows us to do something like this.
There's quite a lot of talk about a second UK spaceport. I think potentially it's Sutherland in Scotland. I mean, is that a site that you're investigating as well?
No, really, our focus has been on Cornwall, and we've had a great working relationship with Cornwall. As we've done analysis, and as well as work together to plot a course there. Starting a space launch capability, even though you have the building blocks, it really takes the will and a lot of collaboration to make it happen. And so we've been really delighted to work with Cornwall and bring that about in Cornwall.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the initial plan is satellites, but once you've got that in place, I mean, would there be the potential for other types of taking other stuff up, potentially even taking humans up?
Well, I think a launch site geography is key. So there is always a possibility that humans could fly both suborbitally or maybe orbitably also from Cornwall. Our focus right now, there's a huge amount of capability that satellites bring. And that's really where there's been a huge amount of excitement and business opportunities, as well as science. Our understanding of our Earth really comes from largely from satellites. That is, our understanding of Earth as a global system really comes from our view of it in space, largely.
Yeah. I mean, the UK government's objective is to have 10% of the global space economy by 2030 be UK based. I mean, do you think that this is kind of part of that, as it is the work when you work with the UK government? Is that the kind of thing they're talking about?
Oh, yes. I think, this is certainly a part of that. Space is to have a presence in space and a business in space. Having the ability to get to space is somewhat poor. And then there's just an enormous amount that can be done in growing the economics of it, be it through communication systems, earth sensing, for business. The whole transformation that's happening in space with small satellites that cost much less than their predecessors of old is enormously exciting. And so there are small satellite companies in the UK that are very innovative. Matter of fact, small satellites have really been brought forth to a large degree by UK companies. So I think there's a great possibility there. And as you get into, there's many levels. There's launch, there's satellite building, there's the service aspect, there's data analysis and storage and taking data from space and turning it into information. There's an enormous number of segments, and there's an opportunity for companies in the UK to play in every single one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that you had a 35 million deal with the new United States Space Force.
Right.
I presume that once you put a large number of satellites up, there'll be some level of concern about protecting them. Do you think, I know that this is a slightly UK specific question, but do you think there's a case for a Royal Spaceport? There's been some debate about it recently in the UK.
As space has evolved and matured, and as we've put capabilities in space, unfortunately, it seems to be human nature that whenever we have capabilities somewhere, there's somebody who wants to have some mischief with them or threaten them. And, I think there's a lot of parallels between where we are in space right now and where we were in the maritime arena, let's say 400 or 500 years ago, where we've grown dependent on space for a lot of our communications and our awareness, and yet we don't fully have control and span of understanding of exactly what's happening in space at every single moment, everywhere, and a way to ensure good behavior there. And so I think you're going to see a progression very much like there was in maritime in space, where people who have significant assets there are going to need a way to monitor them, see what's happening in those areas, and if they're threatened. And so U.S. has done that. I have had discussions, and I know that in the UK, in the RAF in particular, there's a lot of thought being given to how to plot a way forward and make sure that the UK's interests are protected in space. And there's a lot of collaboration going on across the US, the UK, Canada, other countries, as they look at their assets and have this realization that space is now a contested environment, and it's important for people to collaborate and work together.
Yeah. No, I mean, I imagine that lots of countries around the world will want you guys to operate sites from their countries. I mean, what kind of regulatory changes or framework would you recommend to try and encourage in Virgin Orbit?
Do you mean for the UK or just in general?
I mean, either really. I mean, either kind of anything you'd like to see the UK change, or just more general stuff. But what kind of regulatory framework is most helpful for you?
A lot of it, as I said before, is really just the definition. It's not, we don't see any specific roadblock as much as there's a lot of work to be done on, what is the process to license a launch, and there are a lot of parts of that. There's the ground safety analysis and the environmental analysis, which I think is probably the most well defined.
Yeah.
And then there's trajectory planning, coordination with the air regulatory community to make sure that things are properly coordinated. There's trajectory planning and space coordination to make sure that there's no chance of collision. There's just a number of points that need to be very well understood, documented, and it needs to be done in a way, if the UK and other countries are going to be effective, to where it's not a multi-year process as much as hopefully a multi-week or maybe a couple of month process.
Yeah. I mean, for Spaceport Cornwall specifically, I mean, do you have kind of customers lined up? So as soon as everything's in place, you've got people with satellites you can start firing up.
We're right now actually in the middle of that discussion, and there are a number of people expressing interest in flying out of Cornwall, and so we'll be working. We've recently gotten started in earnest on that, and so we hope to have that sewed up in the very few months ahead.
Yeah. Now, it's probably a bit of a curveball. I know it's not really the thing the Virgin Orbit's into so much. But do you think there's any potential for vertical launches eventually taking place from Cornwall?
We haven't studied it, so it really is not our core. I mean,
Yeah.
the reason why, I think the reason why horizontal launch is such an attractive way to get going in Cornwall is because it really does have a light touch as far as our footprint. We don't have big monuments we have to build. We're not creating a bunch of rocket thrust in the area. We're a 747 flying out of an airport. So that makes it much easier. Whether vertical launch will take place there is a matter of whether those other features are accommodatable.
I mean, just one final question. I mean, when it's all kind of up and running properly, I mean, do you have a rough idea as to kind of how many satellites you might be sending up a year?
We would like to, I mean, the answer is as much as obviously as much as the market will bear.
Yeah,
Our system, our system is only limited by our production. And, because we're an air launch system and can operate at the pace of a 747, I mean, we could do 2 flights a day if we needed to.
yeah,
The market has indicated in the past, a need for many small satellite launches. I could see a day when there's easily 50 launches in a year. That said, the impact that we're feeling currently from the COVID-19 is probably going to moderate that a bit in the near term. But the fact is, and the physics is, that we now have the ability to make small satellites do tremendous work that used to take a satellite the size of a school bus to do.
yeah.
And that is going to change the whole business calculation. It enables business propositions, things like a business sector specific capability, which was never something that was really seriously thought about 10 years ago, is now possible. Countries that never thought they would make the investment in space because of the cost now can, because it's not that expensive. So we're really in the midst of a huge game changer in how we use space, the orbits that we go to, how we regulate, your point earlier, and the launching that's required.
Well, Dan, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.